frontal plane activity, abduction, adduction, is mostly about like balance. Call it balance. The rotation muscles, although we're labeling them as rotators, are really usually more about stability. If we think about gait, the two main activities we need to be able to do: sit down, lay down, but sit down, stand up, walk. And maybe ideally run too. The muscles that are doing the most changing of shape during those activities are going to be the muscles of the sagittal plane, meaning the flexors and the extensors. So they're made more for this kind of forward, backward motion. And where they're located is easier to identify because they're going to be on the front or the back of the body, and they're going to be especially easy relative to the limbs. So arms, it's cool in the anatomical position, is the arms, everything from the hips up, the flexors are on the front of your body. So hip flexors, shoulder flexors, elbow flexors, wrist and finger flexors. They're all right there in the front, from the hips up. Everything, you see how that action, if I go forward, all the caves occur there. So this also tends to be the pattern relative to flexion and extension that people get stuck in. The flexors are bigger and more powerful than the extensors. The flexors have to fight gravity. The extensors are about controlling you falling out of gravity. Controlled lengthening and falling. When we're talking relative to the gait and standing up and everything. With standing up, there's some other stuff that's important, like with hip extension, some momentum. But with walking, it makes a bit more sense to think like that. So the flexors will win when people related to sagittal plane will get stuck like this. There we go. And really more, it's like this. We'll get to rotation. Oh, I'm stuck like this. That kind of tends, it's not perfect, but that's kind of the pattern. So where are the caves? Where are the hills? Easy relative to this because I just told you where they are. So the caves will be shoulder, elbow, wrist. All the short stuff will be on the anterior side of the body. Gets a little bit weird just when somebody's laying on the table because guess what this is? That's the anterior forearm. So these are where the flexors of the wrist are versus this is where the flexors of the elbows are. Extensors of the elbow in anatomical position, extensors of the wrist and fingers. Not too bad. The knees, you have to flip it. For the knees, the extensors are here. Couple go, well, one goes up this high. The rest start about here and down, so the quadriceps group. And then there's some weird ones that we'll talk about, like with sartorius and all that. But right there, extensors, flexors. And then the weird element back here of just remembering that there's two components, but the flexors of both aspects are on the posterior side again, where gastrocnemius is a perfect example of a muscle that functions at 2 points, just like how the hamstrings do. The hamstrings are involved with knee flexion and hip extension and hyperextension. These Achilles-based muscles, not gastrocnemius, soleus is the famous one, deep underneath of it, it would only be active with ankle mobility. So when it shortens, it produces plantar flexion. Now, the two work together to do that, but gastrocnemius on top of it is the one that goes behind the knee, and it helps the hamstrings with knee flexion. So hamstrings, hip and knee, gastroc, knee and ankle.
So if that were cut, that would mean you would be able to walk.
It's a, yep, you can't walk.
Interesting.
Achilles ruptures, the whole Tanya Harding, who her boyfriend tried to slash. I remember that's what that was about.
Nancy.
Right?
Nancy
That
Kerrigan.
sounds right. Yep.
Yep.
I was there for a really bad Achilles rupture during athletics. and it just goes. Now it doesn't usually snap like a rubber band, it like is like a frayed blanket. So it's bad. And a full rupture is really bad where it's like whoosh. So it doesn't just like clean snap it, like rat. And then they can get it sutured, and it's a journey. That used to pretty much always be one of the career enders. Like really, really bad stuff. That and ACL, but they've gotten way better at that stuff as things have moved forward. So, sagittal plane-based stuff. Relative to the spine, same thing, not too bad, especially for the extensors. The extensors are these deep muscles that just go up and down right by the spine. That's why people want the pressure there. When you're out of gravity, those have to be active all the time, keeping the spine nice and stable. And why core-based stability is so essential to take some pressure off of that, to get the obliques and abdominal muscles helping hold your torso up to take some pressure off here. But that's why there will always be a lot of stuff through here, whether it be related to breathing, whether it be related to low back dysfunction, or it be related to neck and shoulder stuff. Those muscles, the erector spinae, and then deeper to that, the paraspinals, they live right by the spine, or they're connecting vertebrae to vertebrae, or rib to vertebrae, right? They just real deep right there, that strip up and down. The bigger stuff you see, these big triangular shaped things, are involved with some of that, like trapezius, for example, this big muscle here, is involved with like neck extension. When the two sides work together, yeah, it's helping do that. Latissimus dorsi, as it comes down and attaches into this thoracolumbar or lumbar dorsal fascia. Same, thoracolumbar, lumbar dorsal. Which one is easier in your brains? You need to know both. So, thoracolumbar, I think, is a bit more common. Just this big white triangle, right? But latissimus dorsi, can you see how, now that attaches up at the shoulder. Its primary activity, as you're gonna learn it, is as a shoulder adductor, right? It gets big when you do your pull-ups and your lat pulls. You'll hear lat pulls, but activity-wise, like pull-ups and chin-ups will seem more familiar. But look at my shoulders when I'm doing that, right? They're adducting. So these get really nice and powerful, but look, they tie right into the low back. And this is a cool cross chain relative to gait. Look at the fibers of glutes. It's like a neat myofascial thing. IT band, big white tarp for stability, and that things anchor into. Shifting into the fibers of glute, shifting into white tarp, cross body into the fibers of lat. If you look at glute and lat, it's like they share the lumbar dorsal fascia as a tendon and create that X pattern that's involved with, people think with gait a lot more about like this forward movement and deflection. But if we reverse that, see how it's this shoulder going back with this hip going back, and this has to happen. Right? That lumbar dorsal fascia essentially has to allow for this. Wonderful place for cupping.